I didn't find hope until I lost it. And here's my story. When I was 2 years old, I told my parents, when I grow up, I want to be a professional athlete. Some people just know at an early age what they want to do in life. And my childhood dream came true, and I'll never forget signing the first contract. I was a soccer goalkeeper, and I played overseas. And while I was in Zimbabwe, Africa, living the life I dreamed about, I was taking a prescribed medication to prevent malaria. And that medication built up toxic levels in my system, and what was supposed to protect me was actually killing me. The symptoms were severe, and I noticed my heart started to race 160 beats a minute while I was resting. In addition to tachycardia, racing heartbeat, I had atrial flutter, murmur, skip beats, many abnormal rhythms, and pain in the left side of my chest day and night. I couldn't fall asleep. It was so painful. And that was one of about 10 significant symptoms. There were also symptoms that included waves of depression, waves of anxiety and panic attacks. And I saw doctor after doctor after doctor. I was fighting for my life for 1 year, and it took 10 years to fully recover. Sometimes your life is going one way, and you can't control it, but it's not going that way anymore. Can you relate? And now life's going this way, and even though you want it to still keep going that way, it's not going that way anymore, and it'll never go back. And what do you do at those moments? It tests you to the core. For me, it was brutal to lose so much, and I didn't even want to start grieving. I don't like grieving. And trust me, it was not my dream to, in my 20s, move back in the house with my parents and live in the basement bonus room. Suffice it to say, I was searching for hope. Online, people are starving and searching for hope. Google searches globally right now, countless. How many searches are tied to finding hope? And I've talked to thousands of people and heard their stories and grieved with them. The war in Ukraine, children who don't have access to clean water, who are starving, who don't have food. The pandemic and losing loved ones, miscarriages, abuse, breakups, despair, divorce, adultery, cancer, losing loved ones to suicide, heartbreaking stories. And we grieve with those who are grieving. Where can we find hope? Now, there's a couple statistics that stood out to me. They gained my attention and they stirred my heart. The Census Bureau reports that 48% of Americans feel hopeless. The Center for Disease Control reports that there are more deaths through drug overdose now than ever before. And the American Psychological Association reports that we are more stressed than at any point in our history. We are searching for hope. And where do you find hope? It was at the lowest point in my life that I discovered a vibrant hope. The good news is that hope is available to everyone. And you can't buy hope, you can't earn hope, and faking hope is very overrated. Hope is a confident and joyful trust in someone or something. And your hope is only as strong as the one whom you trust. And finding hope is a journey. When I went through my tragedy, I realized I didn't have the coping skills. I didn't have the approach that was going to work because I knew how to navigate and persevere through some minor trials, but this was far too massive. And have you ever encountered something that was bigger than your coping skills? And I knew I needed to learn something to make it through that I didn't have in my toolbox. And now I call them hope habits, but honestly, for years, I was just trying to survive. I was in survival mode. So what are hope habits? Hope habits are practical. They're available to everyone. They're repeatable. You can share them with other people. They are empowering and they are healing. One hope habit that was significant for me, it was the celebration list. I would literally write down 10 things that I'm thankful for every day. And sometimes I would say them out loud. I would do this even when I didn't feel grateful, a gritty gratitude. Remaining thankful helped me, instead of over-focusing on what I lost, I remember and celebrate what I still have. That's the celebration list. Another hope habit is the resentment check. And there were many disappointing experiences, words that were spoken to me. I was hurt deeply in the healing process, and I needed the resentment check so I wouldn't carry around bitterness. Bitterness is like a poison inside of you. It's an illusion that you're getting even or winning. Actually, it's just hurting you. And unforgiveness is like locking yourself in a jail. So the resentment check helped me daily to remember I'm going to let go of resentment and bitterness. It's too big a burden to carry. Those are some of the hope habits, very practical. The one I want to share with you today and highlight is the one that helped me the most. It's the power of the second thought. Now, psychologists report that we have in between 6,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. We have active minds, and the number of thoughts depends on the day and the person, but there are thousands of first thoughts that you have during the day. The National Science Foundation, this isn't so encouraging, shares that 80% of our first thoughts are negative. 80% of our thoughts during the day are negative, and that's kind of a wake-up call. How many of our thoughts are either selfish or inaccurate, mean? How many of them are impure? What kind of thoughts are you having? Aren't you glad that your thoughts aren't projected on a screen for everyone to see all day long? Would you agree that might be a little embarrassing? And how do you handle those thoughts that you know are destructive or inaccurate, very unhelpful? How do you respond to those thoughts? I didn't have a response, and I was trying to figure out what to do. I was overwhelmed with the negative thoughts that were pouring into my mind. And the power of the second thought. When I was a goalkeeper, I was in the mode that I had to keep the ball out of the back of the net. I was paid for shutouts. Now, I was in that mode physically, but in my recovery, I was in goalkeeper mode, except it was between my ears. Because the battle of your mind, when your mind's transformed, your relationships are transformed, and the culture's transformed. And you can have inner health even if the outside situation doesn't improve. And I was in that mode where first thoughts would come in, and I knew I couldn't harbor, entertain, or believe those thoughts for very long. I needed to keep those from being lodged and instead replace them with a second thought. The second thought's very important. And you can choose your second thought. Choose what works for you. And I want to give a little context in history in my journey. I grew up in a family, spiritually, kind of like Baskin-Robbins, 31 flavors. We have everything in our family. We're very close. We're very united. We love each other so much. We have some lively discussions. Well, going into college, I took a class. It was at Dartmouth College. It was an introduction to religion. I was a skeptic. I honestly thought it was a whole bunch of nonsense. And the professor assigned the Bible, so I had to read it. And as I'm reading the Gospel of John, I'm learning different things and didn't want to admit it was interesting. But you know what happened? I realized this isn't dead religion. This is a relationship with God. And I was as shocked as anyone to decide to follow Jesus. And I started to memorize the Bible. And it became the food or the tool for my second thought. Now, you can choose whatever's meaningful to you. It could be a quote, something in poetry that stands out. It could be a phrase or a sentence for you, or part of a song. This is what I chose, and it was Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. One of the thoughts that was nagging for me in terms of a first thought is that my life's never going to get better. It's never going to improve. And you can hear how hopeless that sounds. Maybe you've had that thought before. My life's never going to get better. There's no future for me. There's no hope for me. And that thought would come and it was fierce and frequent, and I didn't know what to do with it because I was struggling. Physically, I was struggling with so many symptoms, and I wasn't improving. And if you've ever had a chronic condition where it lasts for years, you kind of wonder, it's a blur. Am I getting any better? Am I improving here? And it would be attached to that lie that I'm never really going to have a hopeful life. I'm never going to be better. Inwardly, mental health, I was struggling in a lot of areas. In addition to that, the doctors couldn't guarantee I would improve at all. And I didn't have a career backup plan. I didn't have a job I could turn to. I didn't have something I could improve. I didn't have a lot of friends around. In fact, my parents pulled out a baby monitor so they could listen to me every night to see if I would have a heart episode or if there'd be another emergency. And in that situation, it didn't feel like my life was ever going to improve. So it was very important I learned how to reject the first thought and replace it with the second thought. And it was very practical because it was humbling that I could no longer drive. My heart was too sensitive to stimulation, and with other cars nearby, I just couldn't regulate my heartbeat, and I'd have to pull over, and it wasn't safe to drive. And do you know in your 20s, if you haven't driven for a few years, how difficult it is to get back behind the wheel? And I would say out loud, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you and uphold you with my righteous right hand." And instead of a first thought of fear, it shifted with the power of the second thought. We don't want to be rooted in bitterness or fear or selfishness. We want to be secure in love. And so the power of the second thought is so practical. And I want to encourage you today to start it in your own life. And as you start it, I want to say this, to be realistic, habits take time and habits take practice. And you're not going to have it all down at the end of the day. So give yourself a little grace, be patient with yourself, because there are 4 stages to the development of any habit. And here's the 4 stages: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. Now, what does all that mean? That's a lot to say. I challenge you to try to say that 3 times quickly. What does this mean? Let's break it down. First stage, you don't know what you don't know. And then the second stage, you become aware, but it's kind of difficult. Doesn't feel like you're gaining a lot of traction. Some days feel like a failure. And then the third stage, you're starting to get it, you can do it, but you really have to focus, and sometimes it's kind of stiff, but you can do it. And then you know what happens in the 4th stage? It becomes natural. Now, in terms of goalkeeping, I didn't know how to catch a ball when I started out as a goalkeeper. And so I had no awareness that you form a W with your hands. Once I learned that, I tried it, and it wasn't working very well. Shots would come in, and I would catch the ball and look at my hands, and they were spread out. There was not a W. It was probably no letter in the alphabet, and I would drop balls, but I was trying to get that W going. Well, the 3rd stage, as shots were coming in, I'd be telling myself, W, 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 and I would reach out, and I would get a W. But you know what? I was so locked into getting a W that I think I let some goals past me that I probably should have saved. Eventually, with practice, like any habit, that sweet stage of development where you don't have to think about it, now when a shot comes, it could be going to the upper corner, and I dive and save it, and I'm not even thinking about a W, but I've got a W every time. And with the power of the second thought, this is what happens. It becomes more and more natural. You need to choose a statement. You need to have a plan. What is the second thought that's going to help you the most? Identify and select that second thought. Because the negative first thoughts, they come, thousands every day, so have your second thought ready. And here's the beauty of the progress. When the first thoughts would come, when they first came, that my life would never get better, and that thought of despair, and sometimes even suicidal thoughts would come in. As that happened, I started, instead of days, because I would let those thoughts linger for days, it started to shrink to hours, and then hours to minutes, and then minutes to seconds. And the first thoughts, I didn't harbor or entertain them or believe them. I didn't let them have real estate in my mind. Instead, I'm going to replace that thought quickly, and it just becomes natural during the day. This thought's not good. This thought's not true. This thought's selfish. I don't want it. I'm going to replace it with the second thought. Again, as your thoughts are transformed, your relationships are transformed, and the culture's transformed. It's easy to point fingers at everything that's going on these days, but let's just start here with our inner health and with our mind between the ears. Hope is relational, and hope also develops as we cultivate habits. And these habits encourage and they heal and they bring an inner health that no one can take away. Now I'm going to challenge you as we wrap up to start it and to share it. Start it. It's hard to steer a parked car, so let's make some movement and move forward. The power of the second thought. What is your second thought that you're going to go to replace the negative first thoughts? This is what's going to happen. Some of those patterns of thinking that you've had, they're going to be broken. Some of those cycles are going to be broken because you've identified a second thought and you start to shift and go there when the negative first thought comes in. And as you experience more and more of that freedom, you know what's going to happen? You can share it with other people because all of us were designed and made to receive hope and give hope to others. And you can share with other people who are struggling. You can share with them that there's a battle in the mind, but there's a powerful habit that you can cultivate. Share it with other people. Now you're empowered and encouraged, and you're equipped. It's not overly complicated or complex, but it's underutilized. You're empowered. Cultivate the habit. It's the power of the second thought.